We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H.
Nick. Nick is putting a subwoofer behind acoustically transparent. Asks,
Yes.
is putting a subwoofer behind acoustically transparent screen a problem? If the space is really tight and the subwoofer driver is flush up against the screen, will it make the screen move or vibrate in a way that will affect the picture? Or is this a non-issue? That is actually a really good question. I want to say that because I had never really considered it. Now, first of all, can you turn the subwoofer so the driver is not right up against the screen? Can you?
Or even more importantly, the ports, because sometimes there's more air movement in a more
the ports, kind of fashion. Exactly. Like if you look at the diameter of the port and the diameter of the driver, there's actually more air going to be coming through the port because it's just smaller diameter.
Same amount of air, but through a smaller hole, so higher velocity.
Right. So, regardless, I would not face the driver or the port towards the screen. I just wouldn't do that. Remember,
I mean, at
your
moderate
driver
levels, it should be fine because, like we say, if something's acoustically transparent, you can kind of hold it up to your mouth, blow through it, and really not feel very much resistance.
Yeah, but not very much is not zero.
But it's not zero. That's right, it's not zero. And certainly, like when I had a curtain behind my front subwoofer at one point, whoa, man, was that curtain moving sometimes? Because subwoofer can move a lot of air. So, if you're cranking it up, I could see a vibration possibly happening. And since we're talking about low frequencies, it's not like, what Sony's doing by vibrating the panel of their OLED with little actuators. That's only the high frequencies that they're doing that on. They have a separate driver handling the lower mid-range and bass. So I'd be a little cautious of it. I agree. Turn it sideways so that it's not directly forcing the air right at the screen.
I think most people don't have an issue with this because what they do is they have a false wall basically
under the screen,
and then that part of that is under the screen where the subwoofer is, and that's also acoustically transparent fabric. But that fabric is attached to some sort of board or something. That's also, the screen is also attached to, so that air that might be coming through there is going to be shaking this little black speaker grill fabric for all intents and purposes, and you're never going to see it. So if your screen was floor to ceiling, which it could theoretically be, and some of our listeners do have such setups, and your subwoofer was behind that screen, it could. You ask, is it a non-issue? I don't think it's a non-issue. I think this could very well be an issue.
Yeah, I'd have some concern.
I would have some concerns.
I wouldn't dismiss it.
I don't know what the solution to that concern is, to be honest with you, other than don't do this thing. So he asks, is using a subwoofer as a speaker stand for a bookshelf speaker a good idea? Any special considerations? Yeah, the special consideration is your bookshelf is not located in two of your opposing corners or opposing middle of the wall, which is where we want your subwoofers to be. So can you use a subwoofer for a stand? You absolutely can.
I mean, it's totally fine to have two up front beneath your front speakers and another two at the back of the room, mirror image to them at the back. That would be great. That's a great placement of 4 subwoofers.
But you're not going to do that. What you're talking about is just using 2 subwoofers as speaker stands. And people do this, and then they call them full range speakers now because they can. But we don't want your subwoofers to be placed in those. If you only have 2,
if you only have
placed in those 2 locations, because those are not the good locations for subwoofers. Those will not give you the most even distribution of bass. So, is using a speaker stand, a subwoofer as a speaker stand on the bookshelf a good idea? Well, it is a perfectly fine idea as long as you do not turn the subwoofer on. or
if you have a matching partner at the back of the room.
That's right. You can only do it if you have 4 subs. That is the AVRant approved way of doing this.
Now, to be fair, if you did this, you could do the trial and error of adjusting the phase on one of those subs until you get a reasonable response. Well, I mean, if that's where you have to place your 2 subs, it doesn't have to be the end of the world. It wouldn't be our first choice for sure, but it can be done, the trial and error method of adjusting the phase on one of those subs until you get as uniform and even response as you're able to with 2 subs both at the front of the room. As far as physically, I would just make sure that I have something damp. I would damp underneath the sub to start, and then I would damp in between the sub and the speaker. That can be foam. That can be Tom's favorite thing ever, mouse pads. just something squishy. Something squishy. If you want to use blue tack, that's also fine. That will damp and secure the speaker at the same time. So, yeah, just something squishy in there so that the vibrations from the sub aren't going right up into the cabinet of the speaker.
Look, every time you say that, like the stock on mouse pads go up. We should sell the AVRant. You know what? If we ever sell a product, it's going to be a mouse pad.
Absolutely.
And it's not for using.
You can totally get printed mouse pads.
It's not for using underneath your mouse. It is only for putting underneath speakers. That's all they're for. Just for putting underneath speakers.
That's right.
Stupidest thing. All right. Nick's theater is in the corner of his basement. His master bedroom is directly above it. If there isn't a lot of bass, he can listen at a pretty loud volume and not really hear it in the bedroom above. But if there is bass, that seems to easily transfer into the bedroom. Would a room within a room solve his problem? Would it be worth the considerable time and effort and expense, actually? It would absolutely solve your problem. It is way overkill, but it is. It's like there's a
step we're going to tell you to take first and try that is way cheaper and not very time.
It's like saying I have ants in my kitchen. Would burning down the house fix my problem? It would absolutely fix your problem. You would no longer have a kitchen, nor would you have ants. At the same time, maybe you should try a couple other things first. The first thing you want to do is decouple your subwoofer from your floor.
Yes.
And that's what Rob was talking about. You want to stack up underneath each one of the feet about 15 of the new AVRant mouse pads to secure.
Yeah.
We have to sell them in bulk. You have to understand, we have to sell them in bulk.
The thickest mouse pads anyone has ever sold. Like, why do you want these so thick? That makes no sense. It's going to hurt people's wrists.
You can sell them in pairs. They come in pairs.
Why do you want a mouse pad that has good traction on it? We've never heard of such a thing. People want them to be slippery.
We sell them in pairs, and we sell them in 4 stacks of 20. Okay, that's for your subwoofers.
Yep.
Okay, anyways. Yes, you're going to want to get something underneath your subwoofer to decouple it from the floor. And at this time, to try it out, if you just get yourself a nice, big, thick, plush blanket and fold it over a couple times and put this underneath it, put that underneath your subwoofer. And yeah, it might be lopsided and wobbling around up there, but who cares? This is just a trial. Turn on something loud, close the door, go up to your bedroom, see how it sounds.
That's right.
If it makes a big difference...
You saved a lot of money and time.
You just didn't have to build a room within a room. Now, will it make a huge difference? I don't know. It could. It depends on how the sound is transferring through your home. Chances are it's structural. You're shaking the floor or the walls, which are shaking the floor, which is shaking the walls, which is shaking the floor of your bedroom, which is shaking the stuff in your bedroom, which is shaking your ears.
Yeah, and the clue here is that he says the rest of the sound he can turn up pretty darn loud and not hear it. That indicates that your problem is not flanking noise, meaning it's not some direct air movement like it's getting into your air ducts or it's getting into the electrical outlet of a wall, going up the bay of the wall into, coming out the electrical outlet of the bedroom upstairs. And that's a good thing. That's a really good thing because this indicates that it is that structural vibration, which means that damping your subwoofer has a high likelihood of helping you out a lot. If it were a different case where you're like, yeah, I can pretty clearly hear the speakers and the bass is even worse, then I would go, uh-oh, you've probably got air movement and structural, and now that really means you need to reconstruct the room in some way. So definitely give the damping the subwoofer a try first, because that's pretty cheap and easy and doesn't take a lot of time.
So if that works, then you can get something like the SVS little pads there.
Yeah, the sound path isolation feet.
Isolation feet thingy, or the
or Alex Grandma riser. Yeah. Or something else squishy to put under there. You can make a platform of your own with some foam and some plywood.
John's got a dog. You would need 4 of those. Because they're little. Not known for sitting still, nor doing push-ups, because that's manly. And those dogs are not that. So he asks, and this is kind of immaterial at this point, but we'll answer it anyways. If constructing a room within the room, are double studs necessary on exterior walls? And I have no idea. So, Rob.
Well, shouldn't be. What you're really trying to do is the sound waves are going to hit some surface first, and that's probably going to be the dry wall of your walls. Right. It's going to be whatever flooring is on your floor. You want that surface to have a separation between it and the thing that is holding the floor above. So if you're talking a basement foundation wall, an exterior basement foundation wall that is holding the joists that go across your ceiling and that's your floor above, and then you're doing the normal thing of putting up some 2x4s so that you can hang some drywall, because you're probably not going to hang the drywall directly onto the concrete foundation. If that's what you have, that already is a double wall, right? You have the concrete foundation as your one wall, the 2x4 studs that are just there to hold the drywall, they're already the second wall. So you don't need to put in a second set of studs that are separate from the first set of studs and then put drywall on the second set of studs. You haven't separated it from the foundation wall any more than that original exterior wall was already separated. But if you're talking about the party wall that's on the inside, then you want the drywall on one side to be physically separated from the drywall on the other side, right? So that's what you're after. You're after a separation of that first surface from whatever is on the other side that you don't want the sound to get to.
Yeah.
That make sense?
So if the plan is to include Atmos with in-ceiling speakers, does it even make sense to construct a room within a room? Well, we don't know yet, but let's go. Do the big holes in the ceiling negate everything else? Well, remember, when you do your Atmos speakers, you're going to have them in with backer boxes. So that's going to provide some sound isolation from the other area. But at the same time, you're also going to put some sort of dampening around there, insulation, however, I mean, there's the company that we are always talking about that has oodles of articles about how to do all of this stuff. What's the name of it, Rob?
Soundproofingcompany.com.
There you go. You got to go there, and they will explain to you all the ways that you can do. Because believe me, you're not the first person who's had a room within the room or thought about it, and you're certainly not going to be the last. And they have considered, those rooms. Many of those rooms do have in-wall and in-ceiling speakers. So this is all part of it. As long as you take the proper precautions, it's still going to be fine. But we really think it's probably not going to be what you need to do at this point.
Right. So, yeah, if you're going to create a large hole in the first surface, you just need to make sure that you close that hole behind whatever is you're putting in that hole. So if you're putting in a can light, there needs to be a box behind that can light so that the air can't just move freely through the hole and up into the cavity of your ceiling. If it's an in-ceiling speaker, you put a box behind the in-ceiling speakers. So you can do this. It's just you're making a hole in that first surface and then you're covering the hole. That's the solution to doing it.
I gotta do it. I'm sorry, I'm deleting stuff. So what about, wow, dude, seriously, what about using a drop ceiling? How does that fit into the room within the room plan? You can. I mean, at this point, you're basically building a drop ceiling somewhat by having another room within your room. You could, within that room, have a drop ceiling, and then you could put your in-ceiling speakers there, and then you don't have to worry about soundproofing the other stuff that we were talking about. You don't have to worry about sealing up behind that in-ceiling speaker. You put the in-ceiling speaker inside the drop ceiling. At this point, though, your room is about 6.5 feet tall. So I'm not sure this is the best thing that you could do, but you could put a drop ceiling in a room within a room. There's certainly no reason why you couldn't. I just don't think you probably need to.
And you could also consider the drop ceiling itself to be part of a room within a room system. Because what you would normally have, right? Normally you'd have the drywall connected directly to the joists of the ceiling above you, right? That would be the normal situation. And what we're saying is if you're creating a room within a room, you're creating something else that's not the joists to hold whatever the surface of your ceiling is, and then attaching the surface of your ceiling to that. Well, a drop tile ceiling is already that. You've already extended down the the metal supports that hold the tiles, and then the tiles are the surface of your ceiling, and they are not in direct contact with the joists above. That's already there. So you've done the decoupling. That's one thing. Now, Soundproofing Company, they talk about their 4 methods of soundproofing. Decoupling is one, damping is another. So the damping is already kind of taken care of. Those ceiling tiles are already kind of squishy a little bit themselves, so they're already kind of free to float within that frame, that metal grid already, so the damping's already there. And you can still put insulation above it, which is another of the 4 steps. So really the only one you're missing is high mass, because the ceiling tiles don't have a ton of mass to them, unlike 2 layers of drywall would. Certainly they're not as massive as that. So you're missing 1 out of the 4. but you got the other three. It can actually do a pretty good job if you get acoustic ceiling tiles that are designed to block some sound, and you still insulate above. It can do a pretty good job all by itself. So it's not as good as 2 layers of drywall with green glue in between them, but it's still better than 1 layer of drywall connected directly to your joist. It's actually much better than that.
All right. Regarding dedicated pre-pros versus receivers, we almost always suggest buying a receiver with pre-outs because even if there's an equivalent dedicated pre-pro model, that pre-pro is often just as expensive or more expensive than the receiver model. But what if the plan is to use nothing but external amplification no matter what? Could the power savings offset the upfront cost? I feel like I read this question and I still don't understand it, but we'll go on. Nick figures that there'd be 2 ways to save power. First, there'd be no receiver amps sitting idle, so the pre-pro should use less power than the receiver. And second, you could buy an efficient Class D or Class H amps as just external amps, which would use less power than the Class AB amps found in most receivers. So what do we think? Would the total of those power savings justify buying a dedicated pre-pro instead of a receiver? I'm going with no. Just in general.
On the other hand, I'm going with if you're going to use all external amplification no matter what, go for it.
I mean, okay, this is to me this is all a very convoluted way of saying I really want to buy a pre-pro.
I really want to buy a pre-pro.
In which case
that was my thinking too. Yeah.
In which case I say buy a pre-pro, dude. You don't need my. I almost said a bad word. You don't need my permission. You can buy whatever you want. I am not the boss of you. As far as I can tell, and I'm being dead honest here, I ain't the boss of nobody. Like, even the people I'm supposed to be the boss of, like my children, they don't listen to anything I say. Nothing at all. My wife full on just goes, and that's it. Like, that sound, that means everything you just said, that's all crap, and you can just shut up. That's what it means. Just go sit in the corner, Tom. Listen to your prime elevation speakers, dummy. Right? That's what it means. So if you want to buy a pre-pro, buy a pre-pro. You don't have to justify it with any of this stuff. You could buy a pre-pro and get Class A amps. I don't care. You can sit there and warm up the whole house. You could single-handedly cause a big hole in the ozone layer above your house using Class A amps that put out nothing but carbon monoxide, methane, and I don't know what else is really bad. Sulfur hexafluoride. How about that? Sulfur hexafluoride puts out that. It's a terrible greenhouse gas, by the way. Anyways, you could do all that. And I'd be like, dude, it's your house. I don't care. What you do.
Well, thankfully, these days, like if you're looking at Marantz, Yamaha, Emotiva as well, their pre-pros are not drastically more expensive than the flagship AV receiver. They're either the same price or in some cases, they're actually not as expensive.
That has been a really recent development.
It's really recent, but it's nice.
It is nice. But for many, many years, and we're not talking like, I mean, this is like in the last couple of years, pre-pros have come down. It was as early as 5 years ago. They were like, your receiver costs $2,000. Your pre-pro costs $2,500. Like,
yeah,
you're joking, right? You literally took things out. You literally took out the things that cost the money and then put in XLR inputs, and they're not even really balanced.
But they made far fewer of them and sold them in
I understand why they
lower quantities.
I really don't really care. I don't care.
Economies of scale. But yeah, the thing is, you can very often get a lower model AV receiver that still has all the features you want and still has a full set of pre-outs for hundreds and hundreds of dollars less than the flagship. So that's where,
and frankly, when those Class A Bs are sitting idle, they ain't using. I mean, those amplifiers they're not sitting there like Class A's just sucking up power and putting out heat. They're just literally sitting there putting out almost nothing.
Yeah.
So the money that you're going to save buying a pre-pro, you're never going to offset that with the savings,
power savings
of using a Class D super more efficient. And if you really want to, buy a Pioneer or a Onkyo, right? Don't they all using Class D amps now?
They are.
So there you go. Don't buy one of those. They're terrible.
Well, you could get an Anthem. Anthem is using 6 out of the 11 are Class D, and then the other 5 are Class AB. They're doing a weird mixing matching thing, but if the choice was flagship receiver and all external amps versus pre-pro for around the same price or very close to it, all external amps, then go ahead and get the pre-pro. There's really no reason not to. But if you can get all the features you want for hundreds and hundreds of dollars, and we're very often talking $700-800, you're not going to make up that
the price of a subwoofer,
savings.
basically. Yeah. The price of a sub. I have a really hard time justifying. Now that being said, if somebody walked in here and said, I'm going to replace your receiver with a pre-pro and a bunch of monoblock amps, I'd be like, you are my new best friend, sir, or madam, whoever you may be. I am happy to know you, and you are welcome for dinner anytime, at least until you drop off that stuff, in that which case you will have to call first. So yeah, I can get behind this, but there is really no real need for it in most people's lives. There is occasionally, when you have a very big room, a need for something like that and very inefficient speakers, but rarely is there a need for it. Is it nice? Is it neat? Do I want it? Yes, yes, and yes. But do we need it? The answer is no. Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.